She kept her relationship secret from a coworker and now feels guilty, but was she ever wrong to? She said she was going to Edinburgh with her friend. A small word. A safe word. And it cost her more than she expected. Not because it was discovered. Not because it caused a scene at work. But because the quiet protection she built around herself suddenly became the thing someone else called a betrayal. And that is a particular kind of sting. Not the sharp sting of a confrontation or a falling out, but the dull, slow sting of realizing that the armor you wore to protect yourself is now being held up as evidence against you. She has been in this relationship for 2 years. 2 real, full, committed years with a woman she loves enough to fly across the world with. And she works in Texas, as a teacher, in a state where who you love can genuinely change how safe you are on any given day. She did not lie to be cruel. She lied to survive the morning. She lied the way people lie when the truth has consequences they did not choose and cannot fully control. She lied the way people lie when being honest is not just vulnerable but potentially dangerous, and when the price of getting it wrong is not a bruised ego but a job, a reputation, a sense of safety inside a building she has to walk into every single day. When you spend 2 years working somewhere that does not feel fully safe, you learn to read the room before you open your mouth. You develop a kind of radar that most people never have to build, a constant, low-level awareness of who is in the hallway, who is eating lunch in which group, whose face shifts when certain topics come up. You notice who asks follow-up questions and who goes quiet. You notice who has a Bible verse in their email signature and who brings it up in casual conversation. You notice the way some people smile a little too carefully when something uncomfortable is introduced into the conversation, like they are calculating their reaction in real time. She noticed Molly. She noticed the way Molly talked about her faith, not loudly or aggressively, but consistently, in the small and woven-in way that tells you it is not a performance but a foundation. She noticed all of it. And she made a calculation. A quiet, painful, human calculation that queer people make every single day in rooms that have not decided yet whether they are safe. Here is the thing people who have never had to come out do not understand. Coming out is not a one-time event. It is not a single brave moment where you stand up and say your truth and everyone moves on and the credits roll. It is a decision you make over and over again, every day, in every new room, with every new person. Every dentist appointment. Every parent-teacher conference. Every casual Friday lunch where someone asks what you did last weekend. And every single time, you are weighing safety. You are asking yourself what this person might do with what you are about to give them. You are asking whether this job, this friendship, this moment is worth the risk. And you are doing all of that math in the span of a breath, invisibly, while also just trying to seem like a normal person having a normal conversation. She knew Molly was religious. That matters. Not because every religious person is homophobic, but because she knows her own life. She knows her state. She knows the specific texture of her workplace, the way certain conversations land, the way certain silences stretch. She knows what it feels like to have someone shift slightly in their seat after learning something about you, and to carry that shift with you every time you walk past their classroom, every time you nod at them in the copy room, every time you wonder whether that shift has traveled to other people. She was not assuming the worst about Molly. She was not writing Molly off as a bad person. She was protecting herself from a very specific and very real possibility, the kind of possibility that does not announce itself in advance and does not come with a warning label. And let us talk about what she actually said. She said she was going with a friend. That is not a lie about where she was going. That is not a lie about who she is. It is a word she chose instead of a word she was not ready to say in that moment, in that context, to that particular person. She told the truth about Edinburgh. She told the truth about traveling. She told the truth about being excited and looking forward to it. She just did not disclose the full nature of her relationship to a coworker she did not feel safe being fully open with. That is not deception. That is discretion. And there is a difference between those two things that Molly, in her hurt and her surprise, is collapsing entirely, flattening into a simple story about honesty when the real story is far more complicated and far more human than that. Now Molly sent a long text. A long text about hurt feelings and confusion and not feeling trusted. And I want to sit with that for a second because Molly's feelings are real even if they are based on a misunderstanding of what was actually happening. Molly feels like she was excluded from something. She found out her coworker had shared more openly with other people, and the sting of that is genuine. It feels like a ranking. It feels like being told, without words, that you are not in the inner circle. And when you think of someone as a friend, that hurts in the specific way that quiet rejections always hurt, not loudly, but persistently. But what Molly is not seeing, what she cannot fully see from where she is standing, is that the exclusion was never about her character. It was not about whether Molly is a good person. It was not a referendum on the friendship. It was about her coworker's safety, evaluated against information her coworker had gathered slowly and carefully over 2 years of sharing a building with her. Here is where I have to be honest. The hurt Molly is feeling is smaller than the reason it exists. Being left out of a coworker's relationship details is uncomfortable. Living in a state where your identity can affect your employment, your relationships, and your physical safety is something else entirely. Those two things are not the same size. They do not belong on the same scale. And when Molly sent that long text asking why her coworker did not feel safe sharing, the answer is right there in the question. Because sometimes it is not safe. Because sometimes the very act of asking that question in that tone, with that expectation of access, with that assumption that safety is something that should have been automatically extended, is proof of exactly why the decision was made in the first place. When I tell you I felt this one in my chest, I mean it. Because she should not have to justify protecting herself. She should not have to sit across from someone else's hurt feelings and find the right words to explain that her silence was not a slight, that it was a shield, and that the shield was necessary. The exhaustion of that, the particular exhaustion of having to defend your self-protection to the person you were protecting yourself from, is something that does not fully translate unless you have lived it. And there is something else worth naming here. The coworker who let it slip did not do anything wrong either. They were not gossiping. They were not outing anyone maliciously or with any intention to stir things up. They were just talking the way people talk when they are comfortable, casually and warmly, in the easy shorthand of people who trust each other, and the information traveled the way information always travels in a place where people spend 40 hours a week together. That is how workplaces work. That is how humans work. But the moment it landed in Molly's inbox, the responsibility somehow circled back to the person who was just trying to have a quiet summer and a lovely trip with her girlfriend. She told some coworkers. About 3 of them. And she did not tell Molly. That choice alone tells you everything about the calculation she made. It was not random. It was not careless or sloppy or thoughtless. She looked at the people around her and she made individual decisions, one by one, based on what she knew about each of them, what she had observed, what she had felt in her body when she stood near them. That is not deception on a broad scale. That is someone doing an extremely careful and exhausting amount of emotional labor just to exist peacefully at work without becoming a topic, without becoming a controversy, without becoming the thing everyone is quietly forming opinions about. Think about what it costs to do that every day. To scan every room before you mention your weekend. To choose your words around your own life, your own relationship, your own joy, like joy is something that requires editing before it can be shared. To feel something wonderful, a trip, a milestone, a good weekend with someone you love, and then have to decide, in real time, how much of it you are allowed to describe and to whom. To edit yourself not because you are ashamed but because you are smart enough to know that not every room deserves your whole self. She has been doing that for 2 years at this job. 2 years of careful language and measured sharing and reading rooms before she opened her mouth. And the moment something slips, not even because of anything she did but because someone else mentioned it in passing the way people mention harmless things, she gets a long text about someone else's feelings. And now she is wondering if she was wrong. If she made assumptions about Molly. If she was unfair. And I want to look directly into the camera for this part. No. She was not wrong. She was not making unfair assumptions. She was not being unkind or careless or paranoid. She was living her life with the level of openness she felt safe having, and she extended that openness to the people she felt had earned it, and she held it back from the people she was still measuring. That is not something any person owes their coworkers. That is not a wrong that requires correcting. Queer people are not obligated to educate every person they meet. They are not obligated to trust every person who seems kind. Kindness and safety are not the same thing. A person can be sweet and well-meaning and genuinely warm and still make your life harder, not out of malice but out of belief systems and blind spots and community ties that extend beyond the two of you. And until she knew which kind of harder Molly might make things, she owed Molly nothing but basic professional courtesy. Which she gave her. Every single day. Without fail. With a smile in the hallway and a pleasant word at the staff meeting and every other small performance of normalcy that queer people in complicated environments learn to give freely while quietly holding the rest of themselves back. Here is how she handled it and why she was right. She did not owe Molly an explanation. She does not owe Molly one now. If this becomes a bigger conversation, the only thing worth saying is that queer people in certain environments make safety-based decisions about disclosure, and that the hurt Molly feels is understandable but does not outweigh the reality of why that decision was made. Full stop. Molly being hurt does not make her coworker wrong. It means Molly is encountering something she has never had to think about before. And maybe that is growth. Maybe this is the moment Molly learns that the queer people in her life carry something heavy and invisible that she has never been asked to carry herself, a constant negotiation with the world about how much of themselves to reveal and when and to whom. That would be a good outcome. A real one. But even if it is not, even if Molly stays hurt, even if she never quite gets there, the answer is still the same. Protecting yourself is not an apology situation. She is not the one who needs to apologize here. The only thing she is guilty of is trying to get through a workday without turning it into something bigger than it needed to be. That is not cruelty. That is survival. And the woman who did that deserves a good trip to Edinburgh with her girlfriend, and nothing but peace when she gets back. She told her mom about being assaulted and her mom turned it into a running joke about her. 10:36 p.m. Claude Respondio. She told her mom something that took real courage to say out loud, and her mom turned it into a punchline. She told her mom something that took real courage to say out loud, and her mom turned it into a punchline. Let that sit there for a second before anything else. She was 18 years old and a professor grabbed her head and kissed her. She froze. She said stop, quietly, because that is what her body did under stress. She did not scream. She did not fight back. She just said stop and then she carried it home with her and had nightmares about it for months. The kind of nightmares where you wake up and the feeling stays on your skin even after you realize where you are. She replayed it over and over, probably rearranging the details, wondering what she could have done differently, wondering if she had somehow signaled something she never intended. And she told no one. Not because it did not matter but because she already knew how people would respond, and she was right, because when she finally did tell someone, the first thing that person said was that it was her fault for not being louder. The fact that she is questioning whether she is even allowed to be upset about this is the part that keeps me up at night. She wrote that she is not sure why she is so sensitive about all of this when he was not even being abusive. She is already minimizing her own experience before anyone else has the chance to. That sentence alone tells you everything about what she was taught to expect when she spoke up. She has absorbed so many dismissals, so many redirections, so many moments of being made to feel like her reactions were excessive, that she now does the work of silencing herself before anyone else has to bother. Let us be clear about what actually happened. She was 18 years old. An adult in a position of authority over her academic life, someone with power over her grades, her recommendations, her future in that institution, grabbed her head and kissed her without her consent. She said stop. He did not ask for permission. He did not warn her. He just did it, casually and completely, as if her body were something he was entitled to access. And her response to that was to freeze, which is one of the most documented and scientifically understood trauma responses a human being can have. The nervous system registers threat, and sometimes it does not run and it does not fight. Sometimes it just goes very still and very quiet and tries to survive the moment. Freezing is not consenting. Freezing is not failing. Freezing is what a nervous system does when it does not have another option. She did not tell anyone right away because she was afraid of exactly what eventually happened. She was afraid of being blamed. She was afraid of having to prove it. She was afraid that the story would be turned against her the moment it left her mouth, that she would become the one under examination instead of him. So she waited. She processed it quietly and alone, in the dark of her own mind. She had the nightmares. She got through her first year of college carrying something heavy that no one around her knew she was holding. And then, when she finally felt ready to bring it up to her parents, she did it offhand because she knew deep down that she could not fully trust them with it. That instinct was correct. She read the room accurately, and the room still failed her anyway. Her mother's response was not a misunderstanding. It was not an awkward attempt at humor that went wrong. It became a repeated joke. Something she brought out more than once to use on her daughter whenever she wanted to get a reaction. A little weapon she kept polished and ready. If I am annoying her, she will say she is going to get that professor to come kiss me again. Sit with that for a moment. A mother looked at the image of her teenage daughter being grabbed and kissed without permission, looked at the months of nightmares that followed, and decided that image was funny. Decided it was something she could pull out at the dinner table when the mood called for it. That is not accidental cruelty. That is someone who looked at their child's painful experience and decided it was a useful tool. I need to pause here and just say, I cannot believe a mother said that to her own daughter. I genuinely cannot. When her daughter finally said please stop, it really upset me. Her mother did not apologize. She did not soften. She did not put the joke down and ask what was wrong. She escalated. There was no moment of recognition, no flicker of maternal instinct. She told her daughter that if she had really been upset she would have said something sooner. And then, as if that was not enough, she told her that what happened was her own fault for not being loud enough when she said no. Think about how many messages are packed into those 2 sentences. If you were really hurt you would have said so immediately. Which means silence equals consent to your suffering being dismissed. And if you did not perform your distress correctly in the moment that it happened, then it does not count. Which means she is not just blaming her daughter for the professor's behavior. She is also blaming her for the way her own nervous system responded to a traumatic event. She is penalizing her for the freeze response as if it were a choice, as if a frightened 18-year-old simply decided not to be loud enough. That is an extraordinary level of cruelty wrapped in a very ordinary tone. And then she left. She packed herself up and went to stay with her grandparents, which is the healthiest thing she could have done, and her parents responded by calling her dramatic and telling her she was being selfish because her siblings missed her. Notice what they did not do. They did not apologize. They did not say they went too far. They redirected the conversation to her siblings' feelings as a way of making her responsible for everyone else's emotions instead of her own. She was being asked to manage her family's comfort from inside the wound they had made. She is not being dramatic. She is being honest. She told her mother something painful. Her mother mocked it, blamed her for it, and then doubled down when challenged. At that point, leaving is not drama. It is a reasonable response to an environment that is actively making things worse. Here is the part that I think matters most. She wrote that she is not sure why she is so sensitive. She wrote that it was not even like he was being abusive. She is explaining away her own pain in real time, out loud, in a post asking strangers for perspective, because she cannot trust the people closest to her to give her an honest answer. And the reason she is doing that is because the people around her have been modeling that behavior for her for a long time. When the people who are supposed to protect you tell you that your pain is not valid unless you performed it correctly, you start to believe them. You start to audit yourself before you even open your mouth. You start to wonder if you are the problem. You start to shrink the story down until it barely takes up any space at all, hoping that maybe at that size it will finally be acceptable. She is not the problem. What happened to her at 18 was not something she caused. What happened to her at home was not something she deserved. And the fact that she is still asking whether she is the one in the wrong, even after everything, is the clearest possible evidence that she has been surrounded by people who have trained her to second-guess her own instincts. Going to her grandparents was the right call. Full stop. When someone mocks your trauma, the correct response is distance, not explanation. She does not owe her parents a detailed argument about why their behavior hurt her. She does not owe them a performance of forgiveness because her siblings are sad. She owes herself a safe place to land. That is it. That is the whole obligation. Her parents calling her dramatic is them trying to make her responsible for managing their discomfort. Staying in that house after what was said to her would not have been strength. It would have been self-abandonment. She chose herself. That is not being an awful person. That is finally giving herself the same care that the adults in her life refused to give her. She is not the villain of this story. She never was. The verdict here is simple and it is not gentle. Her mother used her daughter's worst memory as a weapon, blamed her for not being traumatized loudly enough, and then expected her to stay home and smile about it. Leaving was not dramatic. Leaving was the most sane thing she has done through this entire situation. And she should not go back until there is a real and genuine apology on the table. Drop a comment and tell me which of these two stories hit you harder today. And if this kind of content is your thing, a like and a subscribe genuinely help more than you know.